Despite all the controversy surrounding Jason Thor Hall, I think it's only fair if we constructively examine his game Heartbound in a vacuum. At the end of the day, no one complains about well-designed games. So what can you expect from this case study? Other than my usual goal of outlining game design concepts in what I hope is a digestible format, I want to emphasize a couple unique features of this video early on so you all know what to expect compared to the influx of drama-fueled Heartbound reviews. Firstly, despite what reviews claim, there is a second boss fight. Secondly, Jason explains his design philosophy on his website and in an interview. In this video, we'll discuss the designer's intentions because I think it's important to assess a game critically while keeping in mind their vision. So, let's actually break down Heartbound. We wake up in the early morning during a storm as the player character, Lore. Whether the name is screaming at us to check out the Heartbound ARG, or it's simply a paronym of the creator's middle name, Thor, we'll never know. Though it's safe to say it's one of those two options, given Lore is otherwise a shortened form of female German names, and, well, Lore is certainly not a girl. We wake up our talking dog Baron, walk down the hallway, get yelled at by our father to take out the trash, and walk into the kitchen containing a sink full of socks because the game's collectibles are socks, I guess. We can feed Baron either Viking Feast dog food or trash. We'll come back to this decision in Chapter 3. We feed Baron, take out the trash, pick up an axe for no reason, and then walk back toward the house to sleep with the axe, where Baron admits to having a really good time today, as if an entire day passed by even though Lore just said it's too early for breakfast. After we head back inside and slip under the covers, Heartbound takes a bat to the player's head with its apparently mental health core theme by breaking the fourth wall, Baron waltzing onto a black screen to talk to the player about mental health. Leave a comment below thanking Baron for helping you through a dark time. We wake up to find Baron missing and the remnants of a fight occurring that we somehow slept through.
Fucking hell, he's a heavy sleeper. Slept through all of this? The door is jammed, it's not even strawberry. Right, this is like, okay, that was unnecessary. That was really unnecessary.
We discover Baron's broken collar and then walk up a pathway where we slow down every couple seconds for the Darksider sound effect to play. This also occurs in the puzzle room up ahead. I wouldn't slow the player down while these sound effects play for two reasons. One, limiting a player's walk speed can be necessary if you want them to notice a scene whilst retaining player agency, but the only thing occurring here is the growling sound effect every few steps, so restricting movement is unnecessary. The second reason I wouldn't slow the player down here is because it crosses the boundary between the player's presence in the world and the technicalities. Think back to the concept of mental models discussed in my previous Ruin case study. In this scenario, we want the player to fear the potential threat to Baron's safety or be curious about the mystery of what lies ahead. But more likely than not, the player instead thinks, oh, I just ran into a trigger. And that line of thinking breaks a player's presence in the game, or what's often called immersion. By slowing down Lore whenever a sound effect triggers, it emphasizes that the sound effect derives from the player walking across a specific trigger point instead of the mysterious beast, instead of the story and in-world implications. So the potential buildup to what happened to our dog is compromised. Naturally, every element in games is triggered in some way, but the intention is to give the player an experience in which the technical aspects are unnoticed by the player. Additionally, I would also remove all but one of the growls. Repetition and sound effects can often break presence in the same way as noticing a trigger point. After the log puzzle, our first combat encounter is against what's called a Darksider. We'll come back to this soon. We're saved by what's called a Guardian, named Binder. This is the only place where Lore can read lore. And who am I to stop a library from containing books? But communicating most of the world building through a few dialogue boxes in one room across 3 chapters is by no means a satisfying way to pace world building. Additionally, the humor loses me. There's a bit where terrariums hold sticks, and I guess sticks are live pet animals in this Guardian library. There's another bit where each stack of books is referred to by familial names. For instance,
Auntie Book Tower is spying on Uncle Book Tower.
Brother Book Tower hides behind his mama. What?
I get it.
That sounds like an acid trip saying, like, what?
Yeah, I don't get that. Auntie Book Tower spying on Uncle Book Tower. He's just being cheeky and, like, calling each book tower a part of the family. But why? What? Oh, all these sticks that are in the terrariums? Oh my goodness, they're alive? With Bender's blessing, you pocket the tiny dog figurine.
I turned your dog into an amiibo. I'm sorry.
If you couldn't tell by now, most of Heartbound's humor comprises a barrage of quirky LOL so random humor. A strange research paper, how to prepare a dwarf in a jar. What? The label says, break glass in case of goblin. Why would a goblin need a carrot? This is probably just referencing how he calls his community goblins. It doesn't fit in the game at all. I'm Lore. Like, the evil brother of that robot guy? What is that? Okay, really? Are you gonna put jokes here that people won't get? Is this Star Trek? TV tropes? The Heartbound TV tropes page actually connects lore to data? Next, we step into a clock to seek the great power of the artifact trapped between worlds. But before we reach the artifact, we complete 3 puzzles. Unfortunately, these don't count as puzzles. Now, I could jump into a discussion about puzzle design and what makes a great puzzle and potential strategies for designing your own puzzles. But the problem with the laser puzzle isn't at the level where we constructively critique the actual puzzle elements and its incorporation of problem-solving opportunities to test the player's gradual improvement at the game's skill and knowledge expectations. Instead, the problem is that there's only ever one possible option, one possible player action. For the first puzzle layout, we simply push 2 columns down a track without space to push the columns in the reverse direction. Then we flip the 2 switches to direct the lasers into the crystals. This is the introductory puzzle, so introducing the puzzle elements in a simple and intuitive manner is good design. However, right away, there's an obvious problem that demonstrates the importance of playtesting. If you're slightly misaligned for the left column, even though it looks like you're able to push the column, it stops moving toward the end of the track. The consequence is the player may think they've pushed the column all the way when, in fact, they didn't. This can easily occur and did for most of my playthroughs. This was also Jacksepticeye's experience, the playthrough that skyrocketed Heartbound's popularity in 2017.
Don't got it. What? So I'm not supposed to hit this?
As a developer, it's crucial to critically examine these playthroughs and deduce potential actionable issues, or hire a user researcher like me for playtest and feedback analysis. But for the second puzzle, the movable columns are already removed in favor of flipping a few switches to complete the routing. The solution requires little thought, just instinct to point both lasers toward the only possible crystal each can point to. Additionally, the switches changed function without changing form. In other words, the switches no longer turn on and off the lasers, but instead rotate the columns, and yet the switches look the same as the previous puzzle's switches. Any interactable objects with different functions should look different from one another, especially if you want to mix and match mechanics in the future. As it stands, these mechanics never mix and match to develop into something more challenging or to test players' knowledge of the game's mechanics. Throughout Heartbound, we can collect socks. So, if a sock were to be placed in a puzzle level, one would assume solving an extra puzzle of higher difficulty or at least extra steps would be required of the player. But instead, the player pulls the switch required for the main puzzle to reach the sock. So there are no extra steps to the puzzle itself. A great example of well-implemented collectibles is Celeste. Each level contains a strawberry to collect, and it requires a higher degree of skill mastery to accomplish. The third puzzle reverts back to the first puzzle. The switches turn on and off the lasers, and the puzzle solution is to push both columns along the only possible path. And again, the columns can't be pushed the other direction. So even though the higher number of columns in the room might give an air of a possible puzzle, there's only one possible action to perform. So if you perform the only possible action, pushing the columns as far as they'll go, you'll complete the puzzle without any problem solving required. And that's it. We'll never see this puzzle again, but at least we can now collect the artifact. After collecting the artifact, we wake back up in our bed and follow Baron into the void. In the void, we aimlessly walk through a maze to collect memories of the past 20 minutes? Simultaneously, the artifact's voices try to gaslight us into believing we're the ones who failed Baron for some reason, and apparently we did something the player is unaware of. You failed him. Did I? You know, if some evil creature breaks into my home and kills my dog, is it my fault? You can do this just a little farther. Huh? Who left that note? Why? What do you mean?
It feels good.
I'll never say that in my ear like that again, dude. The primary issue, and one of the biggest complaints I've seen of Heartbound from the community, is the pacing and how the player isn't provided a reason to care about Baron. We don't see their relationship play out. We don't experience Lore's family dynamics other than his delusional interpretation of what his dad actually says. Unless Lore's home is corrupted by some anomaly, or maybe his mom brainwashed him. Based on how little the game develops the main plotline across 3 chapters, I'm being gracious with my interpretation. So after we fight the same Darksider, we discover it's actually Baron. Then we go Super Saiyan! Rawr. Baron was corrupted by some anomaly and became a Darksider. At least that's what I'm assuming based on the brief lore provided in Binder's library. Okay, this is a neat core concept to build the game upon. Some type of corruption that transforms creatures into monsters. And this corruption also seems to affect lore through whatever the artifact is. But again, whether it's Baron's death or the artifact gaslighting lore, the game didn't provide enough time to form the family bonds, to get the player to care and feel motivated to pursue the same goal as the protagonist. And that's the challenge storytellers must always bear in mind, to bridge the gap and allow the player to feel present in the world, even empathetic toward the characters. I walked through the beginning of the game with you in the hopes of conveying how Heartbound paces itself. But even setting aside the inadequate pacing, the beginning of the game generally doesn't make any sense. We wake up from the storm and it's too early in the morning for breakfast, so why do we feed the dog at this time? Why is our dad awake and demanding us to take out the trash at the worst possible time of day in the worst possible weather? Especially if the dad is actually nice, as we're led to believe, since the text shifts from nice to abusive, likely indicating Lore's warped perception of his dad. Why do we grab an axe and bring it with us into our home? After taking out the trash and grabbing the axe, why do we immediately walk back inside and act as though we've spent the entire day together? Why does our dog stand on a soapbox in the middle of a black screen to lecture us about mental health? How did the supposed crazy commotion not wake us up? So unless I'm missing key details from the ongoing Heartbound ARG because I didn't change my frame rate, Heartbound can't stop with its irrational contrivances. The combat certainly has the most potential for Heartbound's core gameplay. According to Jason, WarioWare was a heavy inspiration for the combat system. I always loved the wacky, fast-paced minigames that made up all of the iterations of WarioWare. For more recent games, I turned to things like One Shot, Off, and Undertale because of the unique qualities each one brought to the table. All of the combat situations involve minigames based on the enemy you're currently fighting. You can resolve combat situations in a number of different story-changing ways depending on how you handle yourself in those minigames. Jason then explains an example of combat against a sock, where each attack relates to socks, such as peeling dirty socks off a wall and dropping them into a laundry hamper. The concept implied here is called a theme. The theme is what the boss, and the greater area or story that the boss resides in, is about. So for the sock example, the boss's theme, dirty clothes our parents told us to pick up, ties every attack together into one cohesive experience, such as peeling dirty socks off the wall into the laundry hamper. Each game element should reinforce the theme. The theme is the glue that holds everything together. Video game designer and author Jesse Schell describes core themes perfectly. The primary benefit of basing your design around a single theme is that all of the elements of your game will reinforce one another since they will all be working toward a common goal. The sooner you have settled on a theme, the easier things will be for you because you will have an easy method of deciding if something belongs in your game or not. If it reinforces the theme, it stays, but if it doesn't, it goes. Our goal is to create powerful experiences. It is possible to create games that do not have themes or that have very weak themes. However, if games have unifying resonant themes, the experiences will be much stronger. If you don't know what your theme is, it is very likely that your game is not engaging people as much as it could. If we imagine a realistic implementation of Jason's dirty sock example, let's say our parents tell us to clean up our room, so the dirty sock combat begins. We place the dirty socks and clothes into the laundry hamper through a bunch of microgames, just like Jason's inspiration, WarioWare. Looping Jason back in, he imagines 3 possible states in his laundry hamper microgame. For every sock in the hamper, you progress in a positive way. Every sock on the floor, a negative way. And for every sock still on the wall, you take damage. Jason continues, "For me, I feel like this kind of combat gives me a really neat area to play in. I can create very arcade-style situations where you feel rewarded for skilled play and still have a major impact on the story." To take this example to its natural conclusion, the result of the combat reflects the state of our room post-combat. So if we pass, our room becomes clean. If we fail, our room remains dirty. Now I think we're beginning to imagine what Jason envisioned for Heartbound. Each microgame properly reinforces the enemy's theme, and the combat's result is reflected through the environment or story in some way. How did Jason implement his vision into Heartbound's first 3 chapters? Well, unfortunately, Jason has yet to implement more than 2 encounters throughout Heartbound's 8 years of development time. The first combat encounter is against Barghest, or what the game calls a Darksider. The encounter is simple but effective for introducing the player to different combat mechanics, such as dodging, deflecting, throwing, and Simon Says. By displaying the controls, or if necessary, the mouse cursor, the boss effectively sets player expectations. It provides players with a range of easily learnable microgames, and I applaud Heartbound for that, because that's the biggest challenge when designing WarioWare-style microgames. However, it's difficult to narrow down a possible theme past just a dark alien creature. With that in mind, Barghest's laser, fireball, and axe throw microgames incorporate the giant alien eye, a distinct feature of and integral to the alien's design. The Simon Says memory game also incorporates the alien's eye, but I don't know where the other 4 eyes and the iris came from. This seems arbitrary and inconsistent because there's nothing in the creature's sprite work, story, or world building that indicates this is feasible. Additionally, the Fallen Stones attack vaguely represents meteors originating from space, where we can guess the alien arrived from. But wait, isn't Barghest actually barren? And this is where the deeper theme should have shined through. A theme of barren, caught up in some corrupted anomaly, transformed into a Darksider. That's certainly a more specific and interesting theme. However, at the very end of the fight, there's a hint of the theme and the Darksider's identity peeking through, but this potentially hard-hitting story impact isn't conveyed through the gameplay itself. For instance, imagine that the sound of the fireball occasionally contains the faint sound of a ball being struck, which would be evocative of playing ball with our dog Baron. Or, occasionally, a falling stone may be shaped like a dog bone. Granted, these are just ideas. The goal would be to provide clues to enhance the mystery and emotional impact without being too obvious. Therefore, as we weaken the boss, we begin to theorize Barghest may be barren, and then the anticipation of the fight ending becomes much more impactful since we don't actually want to hurt or kill our dog. None of this theme reinforcement is implemented in the gameplay. But what is implemented is partial text encouraging lore to not give up fighting, and this is it, don't hold back. Sometimes the only way forward is through. You got this. This is our only hint that Barghest is actually barren, and is through fairly explicit text instead of implemented through the combat and gameplay itself, betraying Jason's design intent discussed earlier. At the end of the fight, the player can throw Lore's axe one last time for the kill and blow. What's potentially interesting and reinforces the barren theme is how the player can purposely miss the final axe throw. Heartbound's support of this option is admirable. The player who theorizes that Barghest is their dog likely doesn't want to kill him, with a high probability of the player being emotionally against not having the choice. So it's great that Heartbound supports the player's agency when pushing players to feel that emotion about their dog. And I assume this is exactly the sort of story impact Jason implied on his website. However, there are two problems here. The first problem is, again, players universally don't care about the dog because of the beginning of the game's ludicrous events and poor pacing. The second problem is the game fails to communicate that missing the axe throw is an option. Firstly, it's not until the end of the combat encounter that the player begins to question how Barghest might be someone else. And even then, it's conveyed through text instead of clues through gameplay or the combat visuals. So why would we even think to miss the axe throw when we have little attachment to the theme? Secondly, since this is a boss fight, yes, we want to press the button to throw our axe just like every other time throughout the fight. This final axe throw isn't differentiated from every other axe throw, so the player has no reason to believe this axe throw is somehow different and offers a narrative choice of hit or miss. Thirdly, Baron himself encourages us to land the killing blow. I repeat, Baron, the reason we might spare this creature, encourages us to not spare him. So, overall, it's both mechanically and narratively intuitive to not miss, but land the killing blow, and the game never conveys the possible choice and story impact to the player. To be fair, this possible choice to land or avoid the axe throw is a great idea. Ideally, after experiencing some clues through the gameplay, dog bone stones, bouncy ball sound effects, etc., the player begins to theorize, but isn't sure, about Barghest's true identity as our dog Baron. And thus, the player may want to avoid killing Barghest in fear of the theory being true. The player experiences greater emotional impact when the final Baron reveal occurs because of the gradual build-up through the gameplay itself, through the player's experience of the boss. The game can then reinforce the player's resistance to killing their dog by giving them a choice at the end. To give the game credit, it is far more effective to express a choice through gameplay, the final axe throw, rather than a straightforward dialogue option of kill or spare. So, overall, the pieces begin to knit together to form a cohesive and player-driven experience with story impact. But again, there's no build-up to this Baron reveal. The Baron theme is not incorporated into the gameplay. The game never conveys the choice and story impact from throwing or missing the final axe throw. And even when we examine the choice itself, the result is perplexing. Firstly, I would have expected purposely missing the axe throw to be visually conveyed, but instead, Barghest blasts me in the face. Secondly, if we miss the axe throw, the result is another fourth wall Baron scene, but on a white background this time instead of black. It's a mental health check that clearly assumes the player is emotionally distraught since they refuse to deal the final blow to Lore's dog. If you, as the player, seriously need this fourth wall mental health soapbox, this nonsense won't help you and obviously shouldn't be in the game at all. The mechanics and Baron himself only encourage the player to throw the axe. So again, both the choice and impact don't exist. Heck, even everything before this boss fight doesn't establish an emotional connection between the player and Baron. The entire experience from the beginning until now is incoherent and inconsequential. And this is by far the best part of Heartbound. Animus is filled with design takeaways, a second combat encounter and the reason players overlook it, the purpose behind the whale in the iron mines, the level design in what's supposed to be a town, the entire landscape eroding to form new paths, Avocado's point-and-click puzzle, character motivations, and minigames so simple you could learn how to program yourself in a day. And you should! Since you're passionate about games and want to learn game development, I personally reached out to the engine behind Heartbound because it's a fantastic place to start. GameMaker, this video's sponsor. But don't just take my word for it. Game Maker is the engine behind many beloved indie titles, such as Deltarune, Hotline Miami, Spelunky, Momodora, Risk of Rain, Pizza Tower, Chicory, Rivals of Ether, Loop Hero, and my personal favorites, Police Stories, Katana Zero, and Hyper Light Drifter. Even better, Game Maker is free with no limitations until you're experienced enough to sell your game, at which point you pay a surprisingly low one-time fee. That's it. Additionally, Game Maker provides free asset bundles so you can focus on learning and practicing with intent. Never just blindly follow tutorials. Be curious, always be learning. I suggest opening both links in the description or pinned comment in new tabs. After you finish watching this case study, download Game Maker and get started with the Make Your First RPG playlist. Now, contrary to every Heartbound review, the game does, in fact, contain a second combat encounter within the alternative path no one played.
A single combat section, one battle, yes, one that is repeated.
There really is only one actual fight in the entire game.
This is the one fight you will engage in the entire game. It's less of a combat system and more of a one-off mini-game.
This boss appears one more time later in the first chapter, and that is the full extent of the combat in the game.
While it's funny to call out reviewers, I think the lack of awareness is indicative of a problem. The reviewers knew Heartbound encourages good and evil playthroughs.
I think it is encouraged that you do 2 playthroughs. There's very clearly a good run and an evil run.
But no one had a clue about the second boss fight within the evil playthrough.
I don't know if these choices have consequences or not, because doing so would require me to play the game again. And I would, honest to God, rather shove 10 toothpicks up my urethra than play this game ever again.
Within a single route of the game, because that's all I played, you could not pay me $10,000 to play any more of this game.
Oh, well, that's probably why no one found the second boss. However, Ms. played through the game not once, not twice, but 3 times, and yet even he didn't discover the second boss.
7 years of development, and in all 3 of my playthroughs, I only had one actual battle in the entire game.
How is that possible? Throughout the game, the artifact turns the screen monochrome and tells you to choose the evil option. To reach the second boss against Road, the player must follow specific evil choices. The first choice is to feed Baron trash instead of dog food in the very beginning of the game, then dump the dog food into the trash. Fast forward all the way to chapter 3, called Animus. We must abandon Emilio in the mines, and accordingly, both he and his home evaporate, I guess, even though he's only 2 feet from the exit. Later on, we simply reject Avocado 3 times, following the artifact's heavy-handed prompting for us to remember we're doing evil things. But Road and Fern are where the requirements become strange. Oh, you're so scary, Cougar. Go get a job. When we talk to Road and Fern, we can only go to lunch with one of them. To access the Road boss, we must choose to go to lunch with Road. However, the artifact's good versus evil prompting appears during the choice, clearly outlining how saying no to Road is part of the evil route. So naturally, the player chooses no to stay on the evil route. But if you say no to Road, you actually just locked yourself out of the evil route and thus the second boss. So that's why Mz didn't discover this boss across his 3 playthroughs. What you actually need to do is say yes, which the artifact then admonishes you for since it's a good option as part of the good path. And then you're supposed to say no when Road asks to hang out with you. This causes Road to dissipate. To reiterate, the only path to achieve the evil route is to arbitrarily choose the one explicitly good option, an option that the game tells you you're stupid for choosing if you're pursuing the evil route. After Road dissipates, now every character has evaporated into the ether, except Fern, even though her house is suddenly gone. So now Lore has a mental breakdown and teleports into the mental health white space. It's worth noting that if you treated Baron well in the beginning of the game, then he shows up and knocks you out of the secret evil content. And yes, that happened to me. But because I was born with a tube through my head, I played through the entire game again so I could mistreat Baron for you guys. So please like and subscribe if you appreciate the animal abuse. The road boss itself continues to demonstrate the potential behind Jason's vision. Road's attacks utilize sharp claws and fangs, so they fit a cougar theme quite well. But what stands out to me are the two distinct attacks later in the fight. Halfway through the boss, the player catches eggs as a callback to Road's egg catching minigame from earlier in the chapter. We'll come back to this minigame. Now the boss's theme is stronger than just a cougar attacking us, creating a more memorable experience by reinforcing the memories and past mechanics with Road, a cougar yearning for a friend in lore and for the courage to talk to Fern but not finding any. Similarly, as the battle draws to a close, a flower wreath that Road intended to give to Fern floats down. Since we failed to assist Road, we destroy it, symbolizing the player's mental state as they reach the end of this evil route. Hopefully, the potential behind these combat encounters is clear. I like Jason's vision of creating a more holistic system with story impact and deeper themes. However, this is where the combat ends, and that saddens me because the WarioWare influence and Jason's overall design intent are commendable. Chapter 2 almost contains a boss, but we'll discuss that when we arrive at Chapter 2. Jason further weighs in on his vision in an interview. All of the enemies have their own minigames that are heavily varied in objectives. Additionally, as fights progress, the minigames get harder, change objectives, or more minigames enter and leave the rotation. As Heartbound doesn't have random battles, it leaves me free to develop unique games for every fight and tune them heavily to the story of the character you are fighting. As interesting and respectable of a goal as this is, unfortunately, very little of Jason's vision has made it into the game so far. Which brings up the question of the potential. In Chapter 3, Animus, the only combat encounter is Road. If you decide to disintegrate Fern instead of Road, there's no resultant combat, no gameplay, nothing. Same with every other character. There's no combat against Avocado, Emilio, or the other furries. And to be clear, conflict is not the only factor that can lead to a combat encounter. For example, Avocado talks our ears off and can't stop with the unfunny jokes, so why can't that be communicated to the player through Heartbound's gameplay system? Jason's vision of integrating these WarioWare microgames into the characters and story could produce unique gameplay sequences. Like a freeze. Oh, again, self-aware. Oh my gosh. Maybe you're cheesy, dude. Yeah, like the food, avocado. Oh my gosh. Oh, so quirky. When we first enter Animus, Emilio the armadillo thinks we're a monster. Remule explicitly says, "That's my friend, not a monster," but Emilio attacks us anyway. Then Emilio realizes we're not a monster. Whoop-de-doo! The whole situation is dumb and ignores Remule setting Emilio straight. But besides that, any form of conflict can be capitalized on to reinforce both the gameplay and character development. So Emilio charging at us could have been expressed through a microgame instead of a cutscene. In the Iron Mines, Emilio stands injured next to the entrance. We can help him walk 2 feet or leave him. There's also a stone whale on the side path. Why? I don't know, but if you accidentally choose not to destroy the stone whale, you're permanently cut off from that path and forced to help Emilio. And that's a problem if you're trying to pursue the evil route. For those who don't know what just happened, I chose the correct option on not helping him, but then the only other path forward is through the whale. I accidentally chose not to kill the whale, and then it was a permanent choice. I couldn't go back and kill the whale, which forces me to talk to Emilio and unlocks the forced option to actually help him because there's no other route. That's the only route. Why is that even a thing? Why is the whale there? See, why? Where do we even get a pickaxe? And why is the whale there? Why is it blocking our path? Because now, since we have to slowly walk through here and it's incredibly boring. From a development perspective, design perspective, whatever, to go through here you have to choose the good route of saving him. But if you don't save him, if you just leave him there, the only other route is the whale route. But why is the whale there? Well, the only reason for the whale to be there is exactly what we just experienced, where we decide, oh, we actually don't want to hurt the whale. And if we don't want to hurt the whale, Jason is assuming we also want to help Emilio. He's equating it 1-to-1. So the only reason for that to exist is to reinforce the idea that, hey, helping him is actually the good thing to do. But that's unnecessary because the decision to help him or not is inherently conveying that good versus evil morality choice in the first place. So instead of all this whale nonsense, where are the mining microgames in these mines? Additionally, why not use the pickaxe as a progression tool, allowing the player to explore and discover the pickaxe, which could then unlock other paths? And while that's not necessarily enough to create a satisfying level, it's the start of something. Instead of gameplay or level design or quest design, we slowly walk across one linear path. I'm not kidding. The cave is so mind-numbingly boring, devoid of any meaningful characters or quests or gameplay or anything, that after we collect the sunstone at the end of the path, the game asks us if we want to teleport to the entrance of the cave. There's no level design that loops to a different cave exit like in Pokemon, just a fourth wall breaking text box compromising the player's presence in the game as a cheap method of mitigating the tedium. And how does the player obtain the Sunstone? At the end of the virtual hallway lie two deities who seem to represent and commentate on the good versus evil theme, and every time they show up, they speak a lot but say very little. If their goal is to be exhausting, then the game succeeds. And I guess we just kinda have the Sunstone now for some reason, without a single instance of gameplay or combat throughout the mines or to obtain the Sunstone. The only other instances of gameplay are the two minigames, catching flowers with Fern or collecting eggs with Road, depending on who you choose for a picnic. As much as I can discuss a blade of grass for 10 minutes, there's not much here to talk about. The egg collecting is a simple endless runner with significantly less going on than mobile runners, which are even considered filler games by mobile's low standards. From a technical perspective, this is just objects moving along the y-axis at a constant speed, which is the first thing I learned how to do in Pygame. It's not entertaining until the skill set is applied to an actual game with mechanics and depth and strategy, etc. Or, in the case of the road boss battle, the minigame proves to be more effective in a more compact form, much shorter in length and within the context of a microgame with thematic relevance. Additionally, the eggs can spawn in impossible to collect locations. I'd certainly expect those mechanics to be ironed out, especially in such a simple minigame. The flower catching minigame actually reminds me of Mario Party's minigames like Cheep Cheep Sweep, Butterfly Blitz, and Flower Shower that all include higher point value objects and competition. On the other hand, the Flower Kitchen minigame throws out objects to avoid, so it's a step above Coney Island, though again, Mario Party has competition to carry its engagement, and even then, minigames like Berry Basket with actual strategic considerations always prove more engaging. The Flower Kitchen minigame doesn't involve meaningful strategy and drags on for way too long across 3 rounds of the same gameplay, unless you decide to fail the first round since there's no punishment. Failing the minigame continues the picnic with Fern but with slightly different dialogue. And just to be thorough, Avocado offers a point-and-click puzzle, but I don't think I'd consider this gameplay. We're supposed to fish, but we can't click on the fishing pole for no reason. We can't click on anything else except the spider web, so there's no actual player choice or puzzle solving here, and we're rewarded with more dialogue after a single click on a wannabe gameplay element. Then we can't click on anything else except the fish bones, causing the spider web to fish out the bones somehow, which triggers more dialogue and the fly to move to the frog for some reason. Next, we click on the frog, which jumps into the water as bait, I guess. Then there's more excessive dialogue, and finally, we throw the fishing pole into the water. Why? Because screw your agency as a player. So in this point and click puzzle, the player randomly clicks on everything until they click on the one single arbitrary correct object to achieve random events, none of which include the fishing we're here to participate in, and even when the player finally fishes, lore's action doesn't correspond with the player's intention, betraying the player's agency. The only other NPCs are the mossback turtles. The sequence is currently unfinished at the time of this writing, but it's worth mentioning how the bickering between them could have been a gameplay opportunity, an example of which can be seen between ambulances in Virukun and Deltarune, a play off of a virus and antivirus. Their attacks interact appropriately. The antivirus's attack homes in on the virus's attack, adding vertical movement to the projectile for us to dodge whilst playing into the narrative, creating a more effective and entertaining experience for the player. While I can respect the work invested into the versus screen gag between the mossbacks, my job is to examine how a game's elements can align with the developer's vision and design intent. Gameplay implementation would produce a much more effectively communicated rocky marriage. Let's step away from gameplay for a moment and discuss Animus's level design and town setting. In a town filled with NPCs and quests, you'd think we'd be able to walk around a town and talk to NPCs on our own accord. But you don't. You can't. You simply walk from one screen to the next along a linear path, talking to each NPC in isolation, so the entire chapter doesn't support the agency or presence of an actual town. When we start the chapter, we spawn in Circe's home, head south along a path for a cutscene, and continue south for another cutscene. Later on, this area becomes a dead end, as if Circe's home no longer exists. Why? Because Jason wanted to prevent backtracking but couldn't develop a narrative reason to accomplish it. After we travel along the L-shaped road, we approach Emilio's home. Notice how the landscape guides us into the home. Then, once we leave, everything completely changes. Like an earthquake terraformed the entire area, reshaping the entire landscape. We can't even claim Emilio tunneled a new path for us, because Emilio is already familiar with the iron mines, and everyone in this town knows one another anyhow. Everything should already be connected. Surely I don't need to explain the storytelling fundamentals broken here. Consistency, coherency, there's a reason why level designers block off areas with gates and locks, or a million other potential ideas, since designers need to gate progress until the player completes certain content in the area. For example, just off the top of my head, we can gate off the entrance to the mines, and only Emilio has the key, so narratively he's the keeper of the iron mines, but mechanically the player can't enter the mines without first initiating the quest. Since the player can no longer accidentally enter the mines too early, we can open up the level so it feels like an actual town. Continuing along the path from Emilio's home, we end up at the entrance to the iron mines. Then once we collect the Sunstone, or after Emilio uses the Sunstone to create new watch hands, depending on the good or evil route we chose, we exit the mines to find... oh, looky here, the entire geography changed again. Believe it or not, the level design continues this trend. After we walk the only path to Ferdinand Rhodes' home and grab one of them for a picnic lunch, the geography shifts to open up a brand new path. Whoa! After lunch, the bridge scene determines the future landscape. If one of them dissipates into nothingness, the future landscape opens up a brand new northern path for some undisclosed reason, and their entire house is gone. Now, I try to give the benefit of the doubt as much as possible. To be fair, the evil route seems to hint at how these furries aren't real in this universe, so maybe the house disappearing plays into that. But let's not pretend the constant shifts in the landscape and pathing are anything but failed quest level and narrative design. If instead Rhodes and Fern walk across the bridge together, the house remains, and in a self-aware twist, Jason places a trail of ants who are picketing the game developer for making us block your path. Again, the intention here is to prevent the player from wandering off before completing the developer's intended objective. However, most players, after helping Rhodes and Fern, would follow them back to their home, so the fourth wall-breaking ants are superfluous. And if Jason is worried about the player forgetting to grab the pocket watch back from Fern, I don't know, do something else? Most of this game is just a visual novel anyway, so why didn't Fern hand back our pocket watch in one of the cutscenes? Or a future NPC like Avocado can mention our pocket watch, then Lore realizes he left his pocket watch with Fern. Or preferably, Avocado says to bring our pocket watch before meeting her in her home, so the player has the chance to remember to grab the pocket watch from Fern without Lore being annoying about it like everything else in the game. Literally anything, except the only possible option that pulls players out from the experience from a lazy fourth wall self-awareness of the developer phoning it in. Okay, so we know about Jason's vision for his combat system, but what else can we learn from the same 2017 interview? At the core, I feel that Heartbound is about experiencing thoughts and motivations through other characters' perspectives. These kinds of explorations can happen through objects in the world, interacting with the character directly, or living through their memories after combat takes place. I plan to release the memory system at a later time, as I want it to feel perfect before I put it out there. It's something I am actually working on right now and may release in a quick update to the beta sometime soon. Side note, even the Steam page falsely claims Heartbound contains a memory system. Combat never ends in death, and defeating someone allows you to see their memories from their perspective. What you do from there is up to you. I'm surprised Steam allows semi-popular games to break the law on its platform. So, if Heartbound's goal is to connect the player to other characters' perspectives, I don't think it's successful. First of all, games are a special medium, a unification of gameplay and narrative to create an immersive, interactive experience. So the question to ask yourself when playing a game is, how does the game communicate or express its themes through the gameplay? For Heartbound, the gameplay mostly resembles a visual novel and not much else, with almost no mechanics to speak of, and the visual novel itself tells very simple character conflicts with simple resolutions. For example, when Emilio injures himself in the mines, we drag him back to his forge to heal. Then after we grab the Sunstone from the deities, Emilio forges for us. Those events certainly push forward the goal of fixing our pocket watch, but what about Emilio's personality and perspective? He seems to be very hard-headed, ignoring his friends when they talk, somehow imagining we're a monster when no one mentioned a monster and Lore doesn't look like a monster, even from a furry's perspective, and not easily accepting help when he's injured. Okay, so why does Emilio imagine we're a monster? How or why is he tuning out his friends to such an excessive degree? Why is he so hesitant to accept help? Does he have trust issues because of something from his past? Not that I really need to be trauma dumped on by an armadillo, but there's so much unanswered and unexplored territory. If the goal is to experience these characters' thoughts and motivations from their perspectives, I don't think it succeeds because I don't understand Emilio's motivations or perspective other than the surface level expressions of excessive independence and his brainless irrationality. For another example, Road and Fern like each other and live in the same freaking house, but I guess they just don't talk to each other until we encourage them. Okay, great, there's the common high school theme of not wanting to lose a friendship by expressing their feelings, even though those types of friendships never last anyway, so the immature anxiousness is unfounded. Regardless, perhaps I'm just not the target audience, since I assume this is how Jason himself felt when he first started developing the game a decade ago. But I find the whole plot point shallow and not really explored in an interesting way, unless you find egg collecting to be your favorite pastime, and even then the minigame is disconnected from Road's motivations or perspective on anything. I've been streaming the first 4 chapters of Deltarune on this channel, and while I've expressed concerns about Deltarune's gameplay, the game's really good at connecting its gameplay with its story and characters for a more cohesive experience, offering more character depth and personality to shine through. For example, Deltarune's Rock Band minigame is a simple but satisfying rhythm challenge with a catchy song. But more than that, the minigame expresses Susie and Rousey's character traits in hilarious ways. Susie rocks out on the drums, disregarding her notes and loving it.
She couldn't handle it.
She couldn't resist. Rousey then says,
"Chris, the two of us will need to play perfectly."
Additionally, when Rousey sings, he changes all of the bad lyrics. As you can tell, there's a lot of character integration into the minigame that elevates the experience, and it certainly helps that the song is catchy.
Hey, I don't know if you remember me. This is the same guy. I can't play the Deltarune song because it'll get claimed, so pretend you're hearing a catchy song. Okay, thanks, bye. Oh, did you want me to replicate the song? So you can still hear it? Alright, if you want me to replicate the song, I will. If you want me to replicate the song, you're gonna need to put on headphones. Okay, ready?
And it certainly helps that the song is catchy, unlike the grating looped melody of Heartbound's egg-catching minigame. And it offers a satisfying challenge, unlike Heartbound. Overall, Animus is a sequence of NPCs introduced and resolved one at a time rather than feeling like a living, breathing town. None of the conflicts or problems or quests involve Jason's vision for his awesome WarioWare gameplay system, and therefore Heartbound so far doesn't execute on a clear vision. The Iron Mine strangely consists of a singular path to the Sunstone without any side paths or interconnected level design or exploration or discovery or combat or any item progression, even though we seem to steal Amelia's pickaxe, and after I reread the dialogue multiple times, the pickaxe is never mentioned a single time. We just suddenly have it because it's convenient, I suppose. The minigames are simple and shallow. Avocado's point-and-click adventure comprises randomly clicking on all of the options until something arbitrarily triggers. The level design doesn't support the town setting. The entire geography constantly terraforms to reveal more of the town, producing a very jarring and railroaded experience that doesn't support player agency and therefore disrespects games as a medium. And to top it all off, lore is constantly bewildered by the talking animals. Talking animals? I finally lost it! Well, I'm off to explore a cave to fix a watch in a village full of talking animals. Well, I finally lost it. Talking animals? Floating heads? What next? In addition to the unfunny cliche of, oh, fiddlesticks, a talking animal, let me remind you that lore had a talking dog. The plot hole here is not even subtle. Okay, now let's talk about Chapter 2, The Tower. The Tower is a direct allegory for the office life, filled with various roles and jobs as lore climbs the ranks in the corporate world. There's much to discuss: the strange red room puzzle, passing out in the janitor's closet, as you do on a weekday night, the cafeteria and another comparison to Deltarune, the mailroom and its relation to the themes of the tower, the gold item and boss door objectives, and the boss fight. Wait, did I just say boss fight? Why didn't I mention this earlier? We'll get to that, sweetie. First off, we spawn in a bright red room that's difficult to look at. When I streamed Heartbound on this channel, some people told me they had to tab out of the stream because of the red. A more muted color would instantly improve this room. The room itself comprises a riddle. Figure out the 4-digit combination code. Okay, great. Most of the combination can be derived from the notes. The first digit is 8. The second is the mightiest, so 9. The third is younger and has barely come of age, so 1. The fourth digit is where the puzzle fails because it requires in-depth tennis knowledge. And as much as I love tennis and table tennis, even I had forgotten tennis scoring rules. In tennis, 0 points is called love. 1 point is actually 15, 2 points is actually 30, and 3 points is actually 40. Yes, it's bizarre. So in a game where love has set the stage, hinting at tennis scoring beginning at 0, 40 equates to the number 3 for the code. Heartbound relies on the player bringing the tennis rules into the game as part of their schema, and that's a problem. Games cannot rely on players' outside knowledge to fill in the blanks. If the player doesn't know the rules of tennis, they're just screwed and cannot continue playing the game. The last feature of this red room is the second half of the computer prompt. If you find you can't compete and would rather rest today, you can always feed us 7 ones and be right on your way. Excuse me? This cheat code isn't some accessibility feature or an excuse for the tennis puzzle. A designer must assume players will take the path of least resistance. Or, as Civilization 3 and 4 designer Soren Johnson famously wrote, given the opportunity, players will optimize the fun out of a game. Designing content for the player to engage with and then telling them, oh, by the way, you can just walk out the door and not solve the puzzle, defeats the entire purpose of engaging with the game in the first place. And if we consider the player psychology of taking the path of least resistance, the puzzle might as well not exist. Once we complete or skip the puzzle, we're officially in the main office area, so let's explore the content. First of all, the janitor's closet contains a sink, and yes, I'm about to rant about a darn sink. We can either drink the water or ignore it. If we drink the water, we encounter our guardian Binder again for a main storyline scene where we finally talk about the evil book central to the plot, the artifact we collected at the beginning of the game. And then we wake up with a key to a secret area. So overall, drinking the water is a pretty big deal. The problem is, why would we drink the black water, aside from the superficial morbid curiosity that comes with the clear negative connotations? Is there maybe a hint or lore that expands on black water? Or something more subtle, a hint that says we can only talk to this world's guardian in the dreamscape, so poisoning ourselves with black water would be a method of doing so. It's odd that Heartbound's significant plot-relevant scene is locked behind a random action without a hint at how we can talk to Binder whenever we pass out or enter the dreamscape. I think accessing this scene would have been more rewarding if the game provided clues toward the potential puzzle. As we progress through the tower, we're assigned a role in the company and complete a task. Then we're promoted to a different role and complete a task, and rinse and repeat. The first role resides in the cafeteria. We park ourselves behind the counter and fulfill food orders, and all we do is walk back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, one item at a time. The execution of this challenge is incredibly tedious. There's no reason not to allow players to stack multiple items at a time, but even just conceptually, the mechanic is shallow and boring. There's nothing like food preparation or cook time, mechanics seen in games like Overcooked because they add strategy and skill expression like time, food, and customer management, none of which exist in Heartbound. Deltarune's cooking minigame is also relatively simple, but the risk-reward gameplay loop creates sufficient strategic depth, especially for a minigame. The goal is to stack food on her head, jump over flames, and throw the stack to customers for points. The complexity is fairly low, as minigames should be, but the tricky part is maximizing the potential behind each element. For those familiar with my Cuphead DLC series, you'll know how I define depth as the number of interactions between game elements. Now, pay attention to how everything interacts. The player collects falling food items. The food items stack and can be thrown. The player jumps over flames. If a flame hits the player, the stack of food falls. The higher the stack, the less the jump distance and the more delay between the button press and the jump, so it's more difficult to jump over the flames. Okay, this might be it. Oh my gosh! Oh, that was a huge delay. This also means carrying higher stacks is a much higher risk, but the corresponding high reward is when the player successfully throws a high stack to a VIP. The player must time their throw in between normal customers and far enough away from an oncoming flame to reach a VIP. This is gonna, oh, that jump was difficult. I got hit there, but it was worth it. I was so afraid of losing that stack. Now Heartbound's minigame certainly looks more egregious by comparison. Yes, the minigame's low complexity is desirable because it prevents cognitive overload, but our focus should be on how the minigame makes the most of its complexity, and there's just nothing here. I'd also argue Heartbound's complexity is actually too low. There aren't enough game elements to support depth. Even though one could argue Deltarune's cooking minigame looks relatively simple, it still contains multiple elements so each can interact with one another. Moving, jumping, collecting food, stacking food, flames, throwing, normal customers, VIPs, and a scoring system. Heartbound, on the other hand, comprises just moving, picking up one food item at a time, food orders, and a completed order counter, not even a scoring system. There are fewer game elements, and they interact in a very one-dimensional way. Let's move on to the IT department, where we're sent out to collect rubber ducks across the entire office space. I can appreciate the reference to rubber duck debugging, but otherwise, there's not much to comment on when we're just walking through the same space, collecting objects irrelevant to the story and which randomly spawned in. We're then sent on a quest for a sticky note. Why didn't the NPC give me both quests at once so I'm not walking back and forth like a bozo? We'll never know. Then we mosey on over to the mailroom. This minigame isn't really a minigame, and surprisingly, I'm almost okay with that. The player stamps each letter as it arrives. And that's it. Except that's a lie, because the player doesn't press anything to stamp each letter. Lore stamps each letter automatically.
All right. You said stamp them as they arrive. I'm ready. Oh, I don't actually have to click? That's boring.
The goal of this sequence is to convey the message, the theme, maybe this isn't so bad, this place, these people, the comforting repetition. Alongside the music, I think there's a place in games for these more calm, introspective, or reflective moments. For example, any game involving a journey and music with vocals. The moment only works when it has emotional weight behind it, whether introspective, reflective of past events, or an inevitability of a future event, or sometimes all three.
Okay, I was gonna play this song. Sony doesn't know what fair use is, I guess, since it got copyright claimed. So, pretend you're hearing the song that I'm gonna link in the description. Leave a comment below telling me what your favorite fruit and protein combination is.
Oh my god. Oh, it's so beautiful. Like it's like moments like that where you take what you've had before, which is just, you're just going on a journey with your horse and you transform it into something new. This one's, it's exploring your old home. Like this is you came back from unfamiliar territory, so it's like a welcome home, but such a somber one because like everyone knows this story isn't gonna end happy. There's no way this story's gonna end happy.
Returning to Heartbound's reflective scene, it is by no means significant. Firstly, players will struggle to engage with and relate to a theme when they're not controlling the player character. Secondly, I think the theme of comforting repetition is incongruous with the chapter's pessimistic view on corporate culture that depicts the workers' repetitious lifestyle in an overwhelmingly negative light. The workers around the office are called menial workers and the faceless, the game describing them as expendable, isolated, and lacking free will and ambition. Even in the mailroom itself, the mail sorter tries to convince us to stamp letters so he can sneak away and escape the tower, ultimately failing because the tower repurposes workers who defect. And as Oscar makes abundantly clear, there are no breaks in Tower Corp. To further push the rhetoric, one of our jobs is to not leave your cubicle for any reason. Alright, I get it, Heartbound hates office jobs and the blatant mistreatment of employees. So ultimately, the mailroom's comforting repetition theme loses its impact and feels hollow, contrasted against the rest of the chapter. The grim, pessimistic corporate theme, a heavy-handed parody of an office job, but it never matures into the more hopeful, optimistic conclusion that this mailroom scene suggests. How about, for example, a quest from one or more of the faceless employees to disprove Lore's cynical and naive viewpoint on employment? Perhaps the quest ends in Lore now viewing the employees with faces, no longer faceless, beginning to represent a healthy workplace and character growth and even story development. The tower would feel more alive and support the player's agency if it changed or improved over time in response to their actions, such as the now more individualized and cooperative faced employees. Additionally, maybe the tower can explore facts like how good managers are those who serve and are advocates for their employees, or perhaps explore principles like the Peter Principle and how to avoid managerial incompetence. Unfortunately, despite the tower housing an entire management floor, Heartbound doesn't explore beyond surface level, sometimes weird statements like, the only people this bad at following directions are managers. You beat the system by doing nothing. Nobody moves up the corporate ladder. Non-managerial jobs aren't considered real work. None of us have a choice here. All these statements are, again, quite cynical, but more importantly, they're shallow because they ultimately don't serve to further the story, grow lore's character, or reinforce the gameplay. It's all just an exhausting stream of consciousness. Let's move on to the management floor proper. Once we're in the management area, our goal isn't actually related to management or even the corporate world. Instead, our goal is to unearth Lore's buried trauma regarding his parents and to somehow open the boss door in the above room. So let's start with the buried trauma. We collect a bunch of gold objects. Each gold object hints at a flashback. A beautiful handbag, the first gold object, reveals a darkened view of Lore's empty family room. A small golden heart reveals the same view, but Lore and Baron sit on the couch. A toy key reveals the same room, but with more furniture. A gold bracelet adds a TV and someone on the staircase. And finally, the gold necklace. Wait, where's the gold necklace? I checked everywhere multiple times, but I couldn't find it. I found the other objects through random fetch quests, but for the necklace... Oh, you find the necklace in front of the boss door. So apparently, grabbing all of these gold objects not only unlocks the flashback of her parents fighting, but they're also the key to the boss door somehow. The game never communicates how the gold objects also unlock the boss door. To make matters worse, the necklace doesn't spawn there until it's the last object you need. So even if the player explores the top room, they likely haven't found the other gold objects yet. So they see there's absolutely nothing in the room, and therefore will never check that room again until they unlock the boss door. Except, again, we have absolutely no idea how to unlock the boss door. And spiraling further, even if we knew how to unlock the boss door, we can't unlock the boss door until the gold necklace spawns next to the boss door that we have no reason to visit because we don't know the gold objects unlock the boss door. And even if we did, we're not visiting until we've collected every gold object. In other words, the player has no reason to check the boss door again since there's no indication they hold an arbitrary key for the door. And the player will reasonably assume one of the gold objects isn't going to suddenly spawn out of nowhere, an object they think isn't related to the boss door in the first place. There are several layers of narrative and mechanical nonsense, and it's incredibly frustrating. For the flashback itself, it's just parents arguing. I don't know why there isn't a combat encounter here that represents us trying to ignore the fighting while watching TV. That would be such a clever gameplay integration and would incorporate Jason's vision for his game. Additionally, I don't know why each gold object we discover only reveals piecemeal parts of the scene, like it's tempting us toward the big flashback reveal, but there's nothing in each newly revealed part to grab the player's interest. It would have been far more intriguing if each gold item had revealed its own flashback. Okay, so now we're standing in front of the boss door. In a chapter filled with dialogue and fetch quests, surely we're about to fight a boss. Right? Why are you here? Why is there more dialogue? I've been instructed to open these doors for you? Why? See a new hire. Well, this is it. Oh my gosh!
Can we, like... Can you just
stop it!
Let us go.
Look, he's got the 8-bit glasses, though. That's funny. Well, lay it on me, then.
I'm not even sure if it's really her or not.
All jokes aside, is everything alright? You seem kind of down. Does he actually care about us?
Is this therapy now?
Oh, God.
After we just had a brief flashback, just remember, whatever happens through those doors, I got your back. Why is Oscar here? What do you mean, am I ready? 3 characters now. Oscar twice and that other guy, they're like, are you ready? Are you ready? Ready for what? I'm not gonna tell you, but I'm gonna keep you here. You're not gonna continue playing the game. You're not gonna find out. Okay, now we can finally approach the boss, called the boss, who is apparently our mother. The edgy side of him.
Oh, snap. Wow, it's a boss fight.
Oh. 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 Now that's edgy too, huh? We're not fighting on your terms? Well, it's not really fighting on my terms. I'm still like engaging with you. It's called gameplay. Additionally, she claims a combat encounter with actual gameplay would make Lore the boss instead of her. Watching the boss attempting to justify abandoning its gameplay twice is just embarrassing. What happened to one of Heartbound's main selling points that occupies half of Heartbound's Steam page? What happened to Jason Hall's vision for his game? This is why I didn't mention the tower's boss when discussing the combat system earlier in the video. The boss doesn't engage with the combat system whatsoever. The boss's whole gimmick is to gaslight the player. She gaslights the player by reversing their actions. So if you fed Baron dog food, she'll claim you fed Baron garbage instead. What's the solution? Choose the opposite of what she claims. Congratulations! You defeated the gaslighting by pressing a single button on an action you performed at the beginning of the game. Repeat the same process for stealing the apple from Binder. You select No. Congratulations! You're playing a parody of a game where it asks if you want to lose, so you select No. Repeat the exact same process for whether we hit the final axe throw in the Barghest fight. It feels weird that the boss tries to gaslight us into thinking we let Baron live. That definitely doesn't feel like something someone would gaslight about. But anyway, the solution is to kill our dog. Again, that feels silly, but that deals damage to the boss, so sure. But here's the twist. None of this matters. Yes, I replayed this boss several times just for you, and no matter if you deal damage to the boss or to Lore, all that matters is the final option. I don't hate you, or I hate myself. If you choose I don't hate you, you drain the entire boss's health bar. If you choose I hate myself, you drain Lore's entire health bar. This single dialogue option determines the result of this boss encounter, and that means nothing before this option is relevant, so the entire boss encounter comprises this single dialogue option. From a mechanical gameplay perspective, this screen you're viewing right now constitutes the entire boss. Even though I've commended Jason's vision and design intent for Heartbound's gameplay system, I can't help but wonder why he didn't want to invest the time creating a complete boss encounter. Rather, he opted for the simple and quick method of implementing the same dialogue system that is employed throughout the game. And even with the choices the dialogue offers, your choices are meaningless. Even though Jason claims everything you do matters no matter what kind of player you are or choose to be, your choices in this boss are meaningless. I'll discuss the rest of Jason's comments on player choice at the end of the video, post-outro. Despite the potential, the tower doesn't contain a single instance of the combat system, even in the boss encounter. And that raises the question of whether Jason Hall still has the same goals for Heartbound as he did in 2017. So let's take a look at a recent 2024 interview. According to Jason, I want to have a game that evokes some kind of an emotional reaction. I want to have something that reminds me of the humor of Earthbound, which is very quirky, full of puns and silliness like that. But I want to have a combat system that reminds me of WarioWare. It's kind of the emotional thing from Secret of Mana, the humor of Earthbound, and then on top of it, the gameplay of WarioWare, which is a weird combo, but it's worked out. This interview was in 2024, several years after most of the game's currently released content, believe it or not. You tell me if a boss without the WarioWare gameplay system, or any gameplay whatsoever, has the same emotional impact as Secret of Mana. Well, apparently the emotional impact of forgiving Lore's mom and dad, whom we know almost nothing about apart from a single flashback, is so devastating that we need another mental health check from our dead dog. Baron? Blinded. Oh my gosh, I'm blinded. It's hard to face our bad memories. Oh my gosh, what is this?
This honestly should just have an auto dialogue thing, and you can just sit back and just watch like a movie instead of play this game. Like it's a virtual novel.
In conclusion, Heartbound's opening pacing causes an extremely jarring and illogical experience that distances the player from the events, Baron, and our parents. To reach the artifact, the player completes 3 disjointed puzzles by pushing columns as far as they'll go and collecting a sock without any extra efforts. The concept of anomalies corrupting things into Darksiders is a good start for a plot that never addresses it again. Heartbound's combat offers the greatest potential for an engaging gameplay system involving microgames unique to each enemy and with story impact, resulting in an ideal holistic experience where gameplay, story, and themes all reinforce one another. Unfortunately, across 3 chapters, only 2 combat encounters exist. The 3rd chapter isn't complete, but according to Jason Hall, it's 99% done, so don't get your hopes up. Barghest serves as a fantastic introduction to the combat system and successfully teaches the player each microgame through intuitive controls and clear, distinct objectives, the greatest hurdles for WarioWare-style microgame systems. Unfortunately, Barghest fails to communicate its deeper theme of Baron caught up in some corrupted anomaly who transformed into a Darksider. Additionally, the boss never conveys the possible choice and story impact of the player purposely missing the final axe throw. And at the end of it all, we watch as Baron casually breaks the 4th wall to attempt to fix our mental health. For some reason, we don't instead play through Memories of Baron, despite the Steam page's false advertising of a memory system. Animus is a sequence of NPCs introduced and resolved one at a time rather than feeling like a living, breathing town. The town consists of a singular path without any side paths, interconnected level design, exploration, discovery, combat, or item progression. The entire geography constantly terraforms to reveal more of the town, producing a very jarring and railroaded experience that doesn't support player agency and therefore disrespects games as a medium. The road boss fight at the end of the evil route is a breath of fresh air, but the only path to achieve the evil route is through an explicitly good option, an option that the game admonishes you for choosing if you're pursuing the evil route. In the tower, the player presses 1 7 times to leave the eyesore of a red room. The cafeteria minigame is overly simplistic and shallow, enforcing a tedious gameplay loop, but surprisingly not enforcing an actual goal. You can stand in place and not engage with the minigame whatsoever. There are no consequences. You simply continue the game no matter what, but with one changed dialogue line from Oscar. Who cares if I perform anything well if this is the consequence of my actions? The mail stamping sequence aimed for an emotional, comforting repetition moment, but it's incongruous with the otherwise shallow, cynical, superficial parody of an office job. The surface-level commentary on managers and faceless, isolated employees lacking free will and ambition never matures or develops into an actual plotline. Instead, we aimlessly walk around, finding gold objects that unveil boring hints at a single flashback cutscene, our only glimpse into Lore's family life before confronting our mom and forgiving her, all without a single instance of gameplay. And finally, if you want to develop gameplay yourself, download GameMaker for free and begin your journey. Links are in the description and pinned comment. And again, practice with intent to make the most of your time and efforts. For my 2 cents on tutorials and other how to get started tips, I offer free resources on my website, designframe.gg. If you're already releasing a game on Steam and value professional design and playtest feedback analysis, check out my services also at designframe.gg. Thank you all so much. Again, I talk a bit more about Jason's Hall design intent after this, but first, please stick around just for some quick information. If you value this type of content and my goal of a unique design focus for this channel, please check the description to find out how you can support the channel. Even simply liking, subscribing, or watching my future or past videos helps a ton, so sincerely, thank you for valuing these case studies. Additionally, I also stream on the live tab of this channel. Not just playthroughs, but actual mini case study documents I invest way too much time into, and also discussions with the awesome community. Everything I do on this channel, I aim for a unique design-driven format. If you join as a YouTube member, please do so primarily because you value this channel, but you'll also receive additional benefits. Custom emojis, priority reply to comments, since my comment sections have become unwieldy, and free early access to new case studies, and members-only VODs. If you don't care about the benefits, I receive a much higher cut of Ko-fi donations, and your donation will be read out loud if I'm currently streaming. Link in description. I'm also available on stream for Q&A through Ko-fi donations or super chats. Also in the description is the growing Design Frame Discord community, where everyone can share their findings for potential future case studies or simply talk about the latest craze. It's also a great place to be notified of future videos or even streams, since I set up a stream notification center so you won't be bombarded with unnecessary notifications. The pinned comment also contains an FAQ for corrections or clarifications, since I hold myself to a high standard and I've never claimed to be perfect. If YouTube has rolled out their new hype system that I've randomly been seeing, hype up the video, folks. Woo! Again, thank you all for watching until the end. Watching the videos on this channel is the best support you can show. I'm incredibly grateful. God bless. I'll see you all next time. Something that I found that I thought might be interesting to look at first before we officially start the game, because obviously something, I guess not obviously if people don't know my channel, I love to look at what the designers and developers say about their game and what their intent is with it, because I think that's incredibly important to do if you want to get, you know, deeper into understanding the design decisions behind the game, regardless if they're good or bad. Understanding them, I feel, is important. So he has this page. He has this page where he actually talks about the different design aspects of Heartbound, a little bit at least. Right, so classic RPGs, what made these and other role-playing games fun for me? To list a set of mechanics that he found compelling throughout his life, and then cut things that never seemed to fit. Things that he kind of took, but made it his own in some way, right? I think that's what he's getting at. I read this already. I thought it would be good to go through this, it'll be fun. Where is my blackboard? You're right, I should use MS Paint. Actually, as you guys see at the bottom, the current Ko-fi donations, I'm putting it towards a whiteboard that I can have like behind me that I can pull out, enlarge the webcam to take the full screen, you know, and so then we can talk about things on the whiteboard. It's kind of like MS Paint, but like I thought a whiteboard would be more fun. Anyway, so many times I find that I never use consumables in the single player games that I play, and to be fair, he's kind of right on this. Or I use them very early on and never again. For instance, I might use a potion at the beginning of Pokemon, generally in the first fight, but then never again for the rest of the game. Why in the first fight? I don't know. I feel like more people are more likely to just not use consumables rather than use it early on. But if you are one to just use it because you have it, then yeah, you kind of burn it early. Anyway, the majority of the time I felt like I should stockpile these items and never really got a lot of fun out of them. Yeah, that's what we were just talking about. A stark contrast to this would be powers such as the Estus Flask and Dark Souls. That's actually a great comparison, because I think that system does it really well. I don't know why they reverted the design in Bloodborne, because at some point towards the end of the game I actually had to grind for the health potion item things, the blood vials I think they are, which wasn't fun. In contrast to classic consumables, Estus Flasks feel like a missed opportunity when you don't use them, because you know that just around the corner you will get them back. I don't know if I agree with this. Hey, it's me again. I'm going a little off the cuff here. There are no circumstances where something that replenishes, like Estus Flasks, will ever feel like a missed opportunity. It just won't, it won't feel like a missed opportunity. It doesn't make sense. If you don't need to heal, then you won't use them, and that doesn't feel like a missed opportunity. It just feels like you're not using a healing item because you don't need to heal. Now, if we're talking more about abilities that have cooldowns, those will only really feel like missed opportunities if the game doesn't place you in situations where your abilities are useful, and that's a much deeper problem that's completely unrelated with this missed opportunity that Jason is talking about here. With this in mind, consumables have been replaced with what I feel are more interesting mechanics, powers that can trigger in combat under certain conditions, or from investigating objects in the world. The world helps you alone and you help yourself with things you have learned within it. Like, if you pick up certain things or do certain things, the game tries to remember them, which is cool, but it quickly becomes quite unmanageable in a lot of games, so you kind of have to be careful with that. He's essentially talking about upgrades in a way, or maybe not even upgrades, it's just certain things may change the combat to kind of tell the story in a different way. even if it's just a theming change, right? Like that could be pretty cool. I guess the point is that he doesn't really want to use consumables, and he instead wants the items to feel more meaningful. And I can respect that. I think it's going to be a lot of work, but exploration and player choice. The common implementation of player choice, where you must select dialogue options to drive the story, has always bothered me. And that's fair because it is a limited system, and it's often doesn't actually involve gameplay in a meaningful way. Which, I know I mentioned this guy a lot. Thomas Grip mentions in one of his articles a theoretically improved way of implementing dialogue options where you don't actually have dialogue options and it involves gameplay, which is pretty cool. I'm probably going to talk about that in a future video. I feel like it pushes me into a more completionist kind of mindset where I want to keep multiple saves every time a choice is presented to me. This immediately breaks immersion for me and takes me completely out of the game. Similarly, I find that a lot of times exploration mechanics are gamified around achievements or minor cosmetic rewards. While this also scratches my completionist itch, I never really feel like it changes the narrative in any way. I think this is what he was talking about earlier with the items, right? You pick something up and it changes the narrative in some way, and that can be expressed through the combat, the characters, whatever you want it to be. Now this dialogue options giving you the completionist mindset where I guess it depends how you handle it. Now, I understand that feeling of what does this actually change in the game, because games a lot of times aren't really explicit about that, right? To be fair, could be a problem with what he's doing as well. Like imagine you like change your clothes, but in changing your clothes that actually changes a couple dialogue options here and there, but there's no way for the player to really know that dialogue had changed, right? If the player doesn't really understand what changes based off of their actions, then that action is no longer meaningful, and that choice might as well not exist. I could choose to forego exploration in some cases without changing my experience with the game at all. I am designing the world and interactions in Heartbound around avoiding these two scenarios entirely. Every time you interact with an object, talk to an NPC, forget to turn off a light switch, take out the trash, or disregard a sparkly bush, the game remembers this, and I was talking about this as well, so he's saying it explicitly at this point, and will change subtly for all further interactions. The greatest part about this design is that it already works and is in the current builds of the game. Both minor and major differences are going to pop up throughout the game and give the community something to share with one another. Everything you do matters, no matter what kind of player you are or choose to be. So again, this is great in theory. You know, it's a ton of work, but putting that aside, as long as the player can feel that their changes or that their choices are changing things, that feeling is more important than anything. Which I guess just to drill it back into game design, I mean, one of the core goals of game design is communicating that experience to the player, right? And if the experience you want the player to have isn't communicated properly, then you're not bridging the gap, right? There's one thing to have the intention of it, and then you have to bridge the gap for it. And to be clear, I'm not saying that Heartbound fails at this. Those are just my immediate thoughts from my experience.
Hey, it's me again. So a very important takeaway from these two paragraphs is how contradictory these two paragraphs are. On one hand, Jason feels that dialogue options pushes him into a more completionist mindset, meaning he's curious about what the other choices produce. And again, it is important for games to communicate how the player's choices affect the game or narrative. So Jason doesn't like dialogue options that drive the story forward because the choices branch off, and he wants to know what happens in the other timelines, essentially. The dialogue options and the player choices branching off into separate timelines, he wants to know what those are. On the other hand, he does exactly that in Heartbound. Everything in Heartbound is rooted in this good versus evil dialogue choices. He says every time you interact with essentially anything, it'll subtly change all further interactions? Isn't that the exact design philosophy that Jason says he hates? This legitimately confused me when I first read it, and I cannot reconcile it because Jason did not respond to comment when I reached out to him via email. But apparently, all these minor and major differences that will randomly pop up throughout the game will give the community something to share with one another and completely avoids the problem that has bothered him of the completionist mindset of wanting to know what the other choices or options result in. Supposedly, he avoided the problem by embracing and implementing the problem. I don't know what kind of magic he imbued in his game, but as you're about to find out, he feels he's trying things that are entirely new that no other game has ever done before. Combat! This is the last thing that he talks about, is combat. I've always been really split on combat mechanics throughout the years. On one hand, I love the stat-driven choices you have to make when building a character or team in a classic JRPG or Dungeons & Dragons. At the same time, I feel like the more stat-centric and experience-heavy a game becomes, the more it feels like I just need to grind experience instead of enjoy the world I am a part of. To be fair, this is why DMs who know what they're doing won't run experience systems. They'll run the other one. I forget what it's called. Where you level up at key points and major beats instead of gaining experience. Nothing ever felt right, so I want to try something that I have never seen before. Ooh, actually, that's a dangerous sentence. You've never seen it before? With Heartbound, I am taking a very massive departure from general RPG mechanics and trying something that I feel is entirely new. The only statistic in Heartbound is lore's health, and the only progression is your skill as a player. Yes, that's pretty standard in games.
That's most video games.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, that's probably more video games than not, actually. All of combat situations, I think it's for all combat situations involve mini games based on the enemy you're currently fighting. Now this was the coolest, potentially coolest thing I read when I was reading through this before. Yes, I'm aware that there's not much combat in the game yet, unfortunately. You can resolve combat situations in a number of different story-changing ways depending on how you handle yourself in those minigames. And then he has an example where it's... like, the point of this example is, like, if you're fighting a sock, then an attack would be sock-related, right? Right, like, you peel dirty socks off of your screen, right? It's a thematic way... It's a thematic minigame related to the enemy itself, right? Which is great, actually. A good place to start designing is having some kind of core theme. And I talk about this a lot in my Cuphead DLC series, because those Cuphead DLC bosses don't do a great job at this. So I like this. I like where he's coming from for this. For every sock in the hamper, you progress positive way. Every sock on the floor, a negative way. For me, I feel like this kind of combat gives me a really neat area to play in. And that's true. I can create very arcade-style situations where you can feel rewarded for skilled play and still have a major impact on the story. Which would be interesting, because what he's talking about seems to extend beyond the theme of the boss, right? It seems to be like actually impacting the story outside of the combat in some way. Again, that starts becoming more complicated, and usually, you know, if games do that, it's going to be contained in a manageable way, which I imagine he would keep it relatively contained for this to work. Unless he has, like, you know, major impact, you know, he might have some major story beats that, you know, the whole game isn't released yet, so who knows how things will actually affect things and what combat will do in the future.